So, very good evening, dear friends, and welcome. I have initiated discussion on the rule of majority under the Companies Act, and I have told you about the judgment of Fuss versus Arbotel, and then Fuss versus Arbotel is the landmark judgment which I have already explained to you, and then it was further followed in various other English cases. In this regard, on the rule of majority, there are umpteen number of judgments which have to be taken into account. One such judgment is the judgment in Burland versus Early. I think earlier also I referred to this. This is 1902 Appeal Cases 83, where Lord Dewey explained that the rule in Fuss versus Harbottle is an elementary principle of law relating to joint stock companies that the court will not interfere. This is the most important aspect. The court will not interfere with the internal management of companies, acting within their powers, and in fact, the court has no power to do so. So, friends, this is one particular landmark judgment. Now it is a settled law that in order to redress a wrong done to the company or to recover damages alleged to be due to the company, the action should be brought by the company itself by derivative action and, in fact, not by its members. This particular principle holds good even in the case of an act of a company which has been done in an irregular manner, provided that irregularity is of such a matter that it is within the power of majority to regularize it. How it can be regularized? If an act is intra-virus memorandum but ultra-virus articles, then it can be regularized. If the act is ultra-virus, the memorandum, then it can't be done. This is what we have learnt earlier. The same principle holds good even now. Then, friends, this particular issue was restated in Edward versus Halliwell. Earlier, I was referring to this particular judgment. This is 1952 All England Reports 1064, where it was held that this particular rule in Fuss versus Arbotel comes to no more than this. This was the observation of the learned judge. First, the proper plaintiff in respect of a wrong alleged to be done to a company is prima facie the company itself. That means again, the company's views are reflected by majority view in the duly conducted meetings. Secondly, where the alleged wrong is a transaction which might be made binding on the company by a simple majority of members, no individual member of the company is allowed to maintain an action in respect of that matter for the simple reason that if a mere majority of the members of the company is in favor what has been done, then cadet quotio. If, on the other hand, a simple majority of the members of the company is against what has been done, then there is no valid reason why the company itself should not sue. That is the reason why it is the company itself which is the aggrieved party, then shareholders cannot interfere. The next important citation, I am giving you the various citations, English as well as Indian, in respect of this rule of majority and which was laid basically in Fuss versus Harbottle. That is the exercise I am trying to do for you. Then, my dear friends, Pavlide versus Johnson, another important citation, where it was held that The minority shareholders brought, in this case, an action. This particular Pavlite versus Johnson, 1956, Chancery Division 565, where the minority shareholders brought an action for damages against the directors and against the company itself, alleging that they had been negligent in selling a mine owned by the company for 1,82,000 pounds. And then, whereas its real value was 10 lakh pounds. The court held that the action was maintainable. The court said the reasons are that it was open to the company on the resolution of a majority of shareholders to sell the mine at a price decided by the company by a vote of majority, to decide that if the directors by their negligence or error of judgment have sold the company's mine at an undervalue, proceeding should not be taken against the directors. So what has been done here is that the action against the directors is not maintainable. The company itself can sue by majority decision. So a question is that this majority in fact accepts to sue, then company can sue. Directors cannot be sued by the shareholders directly. Then another particular judgment, Gray versus Lewis, 1873-8, Chancery Division 1035 CA. The company is persona et law, therefore the action is vested in the company and it cannot be brought by individual shareholders. Where there is a corporate body capable of filing a suit for itself to recover property, either from its directors or officers or from other person, that corporate body is the only proper plaintiff to sue and none else. Of course, today the serious fraud organization has come in where a complaint can be lodged, but a shareholder directly moving the court of law is not permissible unless there is serious case of oppression and mismanagement and the single shareholder approaches the NCLT with an appropriate application and takes permission from the NCLT to prosecute. This is the most important aspect. Then the next important citation is Bamford versus Bamford, where the court, this is 1969 one All England Reports, 969 CA. Similarly, it was also held in Hogg versus Cramphorn Limited, 1967 Chancery Division 254, wherein the court held that if the directors exercise any of their intra-virus powers improperly, their act may be ratified by an ordinary resolution after full and frank disclosure by the directors to the shareholders. So that question of suing the directors will not arise. Lord Justice Lindley in Brownie versus Lord Trinidad, this is it, 1887, 37 Chancery Division 117, held that the court should hold fast to the rule that is Fuss versus Harbottle, upon which it has always acted not to interfere for the purpose of forcing companies to conduct their business according to the strictest rules, where the irregularity complained of can be set right at any moment by the majority. Now, friends, this principle of majority was further applied by Justice Plowman in Bentley Stevens versus Jones. This is 1974, 2 All England Reports, page 653, where the notice of motion was taken by the plaintiff for an interlocutory injunction restraining the defendant company from acting upon a resolution removing him from directorship on the ground that the extraordinary meeting at which the resolution was alleged to have been passed was not properly convened. So he was striking at the very roots that the meeting itself was not properly held and the meeting was honest. Then he also alleged that no board meeting was held for the purpose of convening such particular shareholders' meeting. Then, friends, it was held that the erring director, in fact, it was held that the plaintiff was not entitled to injunction to restrain from exercising his statutory right to remove him because the company has the right to remove him in a majority meeting. He must allege then oppression and mismanagement under Section 241 now, as it is laid under the Companies Act 2013, 241 to 246. Then, friends, the Supreme Court of America. I am now taking you from the London to America. Now we are in US. So we find now we are in the Supreme Court of America. And it has affirmed this principle laid in First versus Harbottle in Candless versus Forland. This is 296 US 140 157, where it was held that Justice Cardozo held that the erring directors can get themselves absolved from their liability, provided they can muster the support of the majority shareholders. First versus Harbottle invariably applies in this particular case.
Sir, excuse me, sir, 1 second. Yeah, can you please unlock the room? It is locked actually.
Then, friends, the next important case.
Yeah, it is unlocked.
The next important case is now United States. Now we are coming back to India. In India also, this subject of First versus Harbottle was decided on those particular lines long ago. This was in 1936-34. This is in Bachekar versus Shinkar. This is All India Reporter, 1934, Bombay High Court, page 243. All India Reporter, 1934, Bombay High Court, page 243. And in this case, the directors of a company resolved to appoint a company as its managing agents. Managing agency system was prevalent in those days under section 324 to 348. In fact, earlier enactment and which has been abolished with effect from 3/4/1970 by reason of Amendment Act of 1969 to Companies Act 1956. Then, friends, the appointment was confirmed at 2 general meetings of the company despite objections from certain shareholders. Thereupon, the dissenting shareholders who were in minority brought action to restrain the managing agents from acting. And their argument was that the appropriate appointee managing agents were a dummy company and it was not in the interest of the company to appoint them. Then the court ordered a general meeting to be held under the supervision of a chairperson. And then the chairman put a resolution to the effect whether the company is willing to maintain the suit and proceed. And the resolution was lost. Under these circumstances, the court held it is difficult to see how a few shareholders who represent a minority are entitled to maintain the suit and asked the court to interfere on the question as to who should be the managing agents of the company. And so the action failed and the suit was dismissed. So now you find this was as back as 1934. In India also, the similar rules were followed as laid in First versus Harbottle. It is a global phenomenon, a global concept. The particular principle laid in First versus Harbottle as universal application. It's a very important subject in the examination point of view. A 20 marks question you can get from any way. It could be exceptions, it could be the rule and exceptions, it could be the rule. And with regard to only the judgments which are followed, we don't know. That's the reason why I am making it into 3 parts. Last week, a part was over day before yesterday. Today, second part, and tomorrow or otherwise, third part, so that all the 3 parts together you make out the examination point of view, you can make out a very meaningful answer. There is one more important citation, that is the Parshuram versus Tata Industrial Bank. All India Reporter, 1924. Bombay High Court, 102. In fact, it was AIR 1924, Bombay High Court, page 102. And then there is one more judgment, Ram Kumar Poddar versus Sholapur Spinning and Weaving Company Limited, AIR 1934, Bombay High Court, 437. In Parshuram's case, it was held that unnecessary interference of court is likely to paralyze the working of the joint stock company. And therefore, the court should not intervene in the internal affairs of the company. In this case, the minority shareholders prayed for injunction restraining the newly appointed directors and auditors from assuming the office. Since their appointment to the general meeting held on 1st May 1923 was alleged to be invalid due to irregular procedure followed, the court, however, refused to intervene in the majority decision of the company taken at duly convened general meeting. So it is the judicial non-interference which was advocated earlier by the courts of law, number one English courts, subsequently Indian courts and American courts and courts globally. And today also it is the same situation, except under the circumstances laid under section 241 to 246, where oppression and mismanagement alleged and accordingly the shareholders fulfilling the requirement approach the court of law, that is the National Company Law Tribunal. Then, friends, another important judgment, Jajaria Brothers Limited versus Sholapur Spinning and Weaving Company Limited, AIR 1941, Calcutta 174. The court also in this case refused to intervene in the majority decision of the company. The facts are like this. The plaintiffs, Jajarias, were the managing and sole selling agents of the defendant company. They held minority interests in the company. The company dismissed them from both the offices. They owed certain sums to the company for which a good number of their shares were forfeited and allotted to new managing agents. The new agents, with the help of these votes combined with those of directors and some shareholders, managed to pass a resolution for further increase of capital which was underwritten by them. If the capital is increased, I will become a minority. Suppose I am holding 1,000 shares. You have increased the capital. Others gain. Then what I will fall in minority. So that is the secret of corporate democracy. And so, in fact, they thus placed themselves in position of, because of the new agents, with the help of these votes combined with those of directors and some shareholders, has passed a resolution for further increase of capital which was underwritten by them. They were placed in a safe majority position and the plaintiff challenged this action. Now the court refused to intervene and observed that there is no inherent wrong in majority further increasing its own majority unless there be element of expropriation or coercion. Proof of animosity by itself would not be enough for the action to succeed. So the matter was not considered. Then, friends, this particular rule also was applied in Normandy versus Iron Coop and Coop Limited, 1908, 1 Chancery Division, page 84, where a shareholder was not allowed to maintain an action against directors, increasing their remuneration without the sanction of the general meeting. The court held the plaintiff must appeal to the general meeting itself for redressal and relief, and the courts refused to intervene at that particular point of time. So, friends, this particular rule of majority has brought a lot of advantages. What are the advantages? This rule has been accepted as a cardinal principle of corporate management for its obvious advantages. It seeks to avoid a multiplicity of frivolous suits and at the same time recognize the right of majority shareholders who provide capital to the company at the cost of risk involved in investment. This is the most important aspect. I repeat, it seeks to avoid multiplicity of suits, multiplicity of litigation, frivolous suits, and at the same time recognize the right of majority shareholders who provide capital to the company at the cost of risk involved in the investment. That apart, if an individual member sues a person who has caused a loss to the company, and the company then ratifies the person's wrongful act at the general meeting, the legal proceedings will naturally be quite futile for the particular tribunal. This is, in fact, an important judgment. In fact, and then in fact, the court would uphold the will of the majority under such circumstances of the case. So, however, it has to be cautioned that the rule in First versus Harbottle concerns a wrong to the company by the directors or the majority of members. It has no application where the individual shareholder sues against an invasion of his personal rights. This is the most important thing. Again, the rule applies only as long as the company is a going concern. And in that event, this particular rule would not apply where his personal rights are alleged to have been affected. So, friends, with this particular information, we have to understand that the rule of majority, in fact, has come to stay as a global concept, a global phenomenon, and it has got a global application. I have given you the judgments of English courts, the judgment of Supreme Court of America. I have taken you to London, I have taken you to United States, Washington. Then I have brought you back again to India judiciously, and I have taken you to Bajekar versus Shinkar's case and our own country's judgments, our own court's judgments. With this particular background, what we understand is the rule in First versus Harbottle is salutary, binding, it has got a very wider universal application. So every rule has certain exceptions. So we will have to then elaborately look at this exception point of view also. In fact, as we have dealt with this particular subject matter at length, equally, we must also look at the other sides of the coin. That is in part 3, the exceptions to the rule of this particular majority. So today, I think we have completed the discussion on the concept and the particular principle of First versus Harbottle, which has got a global effect. In tomorrow's session, I will deal with tomorrow being Sunday also. I will take a session unless you want a holiday. Shall we meet tomorrow or not? We will see. So in next session, I will deal with the exceptions and accordingly we will proceed off. So with this background, I take leave. I thank you very much and then goodbye, good night.